Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about my newest interest here, and that's playing Panzerblitz the East Front beta, which I believe, I'm not even sure exactly what day it came out as a beta. I think it's been out for a while. I thought it'd be done by now, but I guess beta testing a board game takes forever, which I'm thankful for because I got to get in on this to check it out and hopefully provide some good insight and commentary as I learn the game that I could say, "Hey, I helped I helped with this. This is a thing that I put some input into." And in fact, anybody can. All that the designer wants is go to Consim World, look up Panzerblitz East Front, or go to Board Game Geek, look up Panzerblitz East Front, and there will be some links that take you to Consim World, and then you can find on the Consim World page some files to download for the game, including the Vassal module, and then you can tinker around and play too. And really, all he wants in return is you provide gameplay feedback. Now, I'm not good at writing and keeping logs, but since it's a Vassal module only, I'll just record it and share my thoughts that way on what I enjoy, what I don't enjoy, and then I'm part of game history right now. Woo! So let me share some thoughts here I have. Now, coming at this as a fairly new gamer, maybe I'm not so new anymore, but just new to this series, because I know originally Panzerblitz came out in 1970. I did a little research, just a little. And then Panzer Leader came out in 1974. These came out, this new edition by Multiman Publishing, MMP, I hope that's what they're called. I didn't research that part. But MMP, this one came out a couple years ago, and I honestly don't know what year it came out. I'm terrible at research. But this is like, people have said it's not a continuation, it's not a rewrite, it's kind of its own thing, but it's inspired by, is how I've heard it described. I think it's pretty good. So I've never played the original, so I really can't compare how the old one and the new one go. So I guess I'm lucky that way, because I think this is great. And I like the counter art. So it works out for me. Now, the first scenario, that's what I want to talk about. First scenario. I'm not going to do a gameplay demo yet. But for those who are interested, if you've never played this game before or something like it, here's how I go about learning a new game. Normally, I don't start with an actual scenario, but we'll talk about scenario 1 and the setup and how that works. But usually what I do is I'll just put like 2 units and practice the shooting rules. And then I'll look at the moving rules and look at like some line of sight rules. And eventually I'll just put like maybe 3 or 4 counters per side out and just practice moving them against each other. And really, I only focus on the rules that interest me most. And for me, for Armored Warfare, that's line of sight, movement, spot check, shoot 'em up, damage results, end your turn. I will eventually add in engineers, artillery, and other stuff, the aircraft. But those are going to be, for me, kind of afterthoughts. I want to get in and start playing. So I start little and just add extra pieces as time, and interest permits. So get the basics down and then start adding in other stuff. So let's talk about Panzerblitz East Front. That game doesn't work that way. It does. It does. But what I did was I thought, let me just go ahead and learn by playing the first set of rules. So the first scenario. What I did was I read the rules and I skipped all the detailed explanations about the city benefits. I know they're in there because I skimmed through. So if I need to know specifically about the effects of a town or a city on my units, I know where to go in the rulebook. I skipped artillery because that had a good couple pages, and I know that covers from drift and damage and blah, blah, blah. I skipped that. There's a section in there on engineers. I skipped it. There's mines and blocking terrain, all kinds of stuff that engineers can do and additional things. I skipped all that. I read and focused on the turn sequence, movement, and fire, and proficiency, because I like that. Your side will have proficiency ratings, so you can help determine things like recovering from a disrupted state and whatnot. So I read some of that stuff. Then I opened up a scenario card. So here's one of the scenario cards I downloaded. Let me show you what that looks like. Now this is just because it's beta. This is just a text file. So if you go up, it has the situation, the victory conditions, how many turns, who goes first, and the setup. Soviet sets up first. Let me tell you what. I love their command and control system. Oh, man, this is just awesome. In Panzer, okay, because I've played more Panzer than anything else because I love the tanks. They have an optional rule for randomly determining who goes. Each segment, if you want. You know, when it comes to shooting, you roll back and forth and see who gets to shoot all their units. Back and forth. You know, it's random. So you might have 2 in a row. Your opponent might have 2 units in a row. But it's randomly determined. All modified on your percentile roll by unit morale and proficiency and things like that. I think that's great. Then you have other games like, let's say, the White Star Rising. It's a chit pull system. So you put the units represented, they have a counter, and you put that in a cup, and then you draw that counter for that unit. So like if you draw a 5th, Soviet tank guard, then any vehicle that's attached to that unit has a chance to move. There's a little more to it than that. But chit pull system. I've seen just basic I go, you goes, back and forth. I move all mine, you move all yours. I've seen Conflict of Heroes, which has a cap point system, which I think is pretty cool. It's nice. You are allowed to, a unit has a certain amount of points. Each action takes away from those points, and you do an action, your opponent does an action. And then you can, have this one start to do something, then, I need to have this other unit over here do something, but that sacrifices its upcoming turn, but at least it got to op fire or something like that. So Conflict of Heroes is pretty good. Band of Brothers, we looked at their counters. Great counters. Counters. But what I like is they have an operational command limit. So depending on your scenario, you have to move a minimum amount of units up to a maximum amount of units. So you might be told you have to move 3 units, no more than 7. And then vehicles count 3 towards that. So you might be able to move a couple vehicles, or you can move a whole bunch of infantry. And then your opponent gets to do the same, and you go back and forth until everything's had an opportunity to do something within that turn. That works. That keeps people involved, back and forth. A little bit of fog and war. You don't know who's going to go next or what's going to happen. And then this is a good one too. It's also platoon level. I didn't even mention this when we talked about counters. They're not too bad. But it's Fighting Formations by GMT Games. Fighting Formations Großdeutschland Division. Now, their system, it's an initiative-based system, but it's kind of like a Euro game. And you have this tracker, and every action on that tracker has assigned to it a certain amount of initiative points. So you might have an action that gives 10 initiative units, quote unquote, and if you use that action, there's actually a little initiative tracker that swings the initiative towards your opponent by however many points you spent. So you're always trying to find something that costs a very few amount of initiative points, so you're not swinging initiative towards your opponent. Because like if you spend 10 initiative units, let's say, and that swings the initiative marker 10 units towards your opponent, and then your opponent uses like a fire order that costs maybe like 2 or 3 initiative units, he can still do another action or 2 with another unit that costs just a couple of initiative units, because that initiative tracker has swung to his side 10 units, for example, and he might be able to shoot 3 times because that might only cost him 3 fire points. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic gist. But that's interesting too. But what they have in there are these markers you can drop. And anything within a certain radius of that marker, their initiative cost to perform an action is modified by the number on that chit. And what that represents is that country's ability to operate within the fog of war and command and control. So like the German might be able to drop down 2 or 3 of these command markers next to units, and then those don't cost any additional points to activate towards initiative because you're within the command and control radius of the radios and flag signals or whatever of your lead elements. So if you drop down one of these markers that says 0, then that means there's no additional initiative cost to have those units act and do something. But if you have one that has a 2, then that means, I don't even think they go up that high, but like I think there's one side is 0, one side is 1. But if you have the 1 up, then that means every unit that does that particular action also adds an additional initiative point. And then that means, you know, your command and control is starting to wear thin, and then it disappears, and then the counters, those markers recycle. You can put them back on the board. It's interesting. It really makes you think about what do you want to do, and do you really want to do that much? Because how much initiative are you willing to give your opponent and let him run wild with? All right. Now that brings us here to Panzerblitz, which is this chit pool right up here. It's similar to what they have there with that fighting formations, in that you get to drop a marker. So let me grab one of these markers here. Marker. And they have these initiative. Where are they at? Oh, it's not here. I think it's under the nation. Hold on. Counters. Oh, that's so small. If you watch my expose into the world of counters, you'll know that this is beta counters, and so they're not optimal. They work though. I thought I had on here their initiative ones. Where did the initiative markers go? Well, I tell you what, they're in the cup. Let me just pull one down and show you. So here's an op 1. Now the way this game works is the scenario tells you how many of these operational chits you put in the cup. So here's 1 at OP0 and 2 at OP1. And then there's a reinforcement one that you can put in the cup when you hit a certain turn. And then you get to put 3 Ops 2 markers in during the administration segment of turn 3. All right. So this tells you how many of these markers you put in. Now you and your opponent can alternate turns pulling these chits at the appropriate time, and that tells you kind of who gets to go next or move stuff next. You get to activate based on that nationality. And the way this works is you drop it down, say here, and then the number, this might be real hard for you to see. Let me zoom in. Didn't help much, but it says OP1. That means anything within 1 hex you can operate or activate it if it doesn't have like a used marker on it, because as you do actions you can put used, or if it's disrupted that might affect what you can do. But like if I just drop that right in here, I can activate everything in this hex and then everything in this adjacent hex. But this unit I would not be able to activate because it falls outside that range of 1. Now they have in here zeros and, according to the scenario, 2. So if I dropped a 2, that means I could theoretically in one swift action activate everything in this area. And then when you activate them, they can do whatever you want. Shoot, move, try to rally if they're disrupted, dismount, mount, you know, all those actions would be happening if you activated them. So it's that easy. And that, to me, like I've heard, you know, some folks don't like that. Maybe that abstracts too much command and control, you know, how well your people can communicate. Actually, I think it's pretty elegant and pretty simple. Actually, I like it. Because if I draw a 0, I got to really think about which hex am I dropping it in, because I can only activate the units in that hex. If I draw 1, I have a lot more choices open up. I can now think about, great, I can coordinate this stack and move them and see if I can, maneuver somehow. I think that's a brilliant way to kind of introduce the thought of the fog of war, the chaotic confusion of trying to issue orders down. It's a great way to also, maybe later, in the early war, your Soviet side might have fewer chits that have a 2. Maybe you're going to give them more 0s and 1s because they don't have radios. In the early part of the war, a lot of their vehicles don't have radios, so it's hard for them to communicate and coordinate attacks. That's why they're so heavy on doctrine. It's when this happens that triggers this event that you do. Regardless of anything else going on, that's doctrine. Whereas you then take the Germans, who have radios and real good signal and communication. They've trained their tank corps to be independent thinkers and all this great stuff. You might be able to give them more of these markers that have a 2 because that's representing their ability to communicate and coordinate. That's like the trifecta I learned in the Army. You move, shoot, communicate. And that chit represents how well you can communicate, that portion of the trifecta. I think it's great. It makes sense to me. Think of it as like activating your leader in like your squad level game. Your squad leader has a certain amount of radius he influences. Except this, instead of being an actual person, it could represent a person. It could represent radio communication. If you draw a 0, that might mean there's some communication problems transmitting orders from the top down to you. You draw the 2. That means you've got your orders. You know what you want to do from higher up, and you're able to communicate it out to all the field units. So that, to me, I think is a great system. Let's talk about some other things I enjoyed. So far, the combat system reminds me a lot of like White Star Rising. I'm really glad I got into White Star Rising first because it really seems to have borrowed heavily from Panzerblitz originally, because I don't think they rewrote the entire rules that much. He wants to keep the essence and the spirit of the rules. And so when I was reading the rules for this updated Panzerblitz game here, it was like familiar. Just like, oh, I'm real familiar with a lot of these concepts. And they've been expanded upon to kind of give it a little more detail. So for instance, with like combat, can I zoom in? That's as big as I can make the counters. But like the combat values are pretty, they're laid out different, but like seeing all those numbers is not intimidating in the least because it's actually fewer numbers than what's on the counters for, White Star Rising. And I don't know, it's just a good game to pick up. And I think it might be a little intimidating if you've never really wargamed before, because the rules are written in a not friendly manner. I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's a lot of text. White Star Rising seemed to be written, I just wish I could put my finger on it and describe it. The rules are just packed a lot more dense, and so sometimes when you look in the rule book, it's intimidating because you see 2 columns of small font packed in there tight. And yeah, there's a lot of rules, but they're easy to find. I'll give them that. There's no index, but I haven't had a problem yet really going back and finding information that I need, so that's good. But White Star Rising just felt more friendly. Like I read that, it just went through it real quick. It made sense, and that helped me get into this rule set. So like in a way, I would almost say read the White Star Rising rules, because you can get that on the Lock and Load website. Read it. It's not much. And then attack Panzerblitz here, the new Panzerblitz, and it will make a lot of sense. Like you'll go through and you're like, oh yeah, I already know how to do that. And then just include the nuances for their specific rules. And that's what I did, and it helped a lot. And then again, just kind of limit, hey, am I doing artillery or not? But see, here's the kicker. Let's talk about that scenario card again. So we got our command and control set up. Next part of the scenario card then goes in and talks about the forces that you get. Now, let me tell you about this first scenario. I'm a little confused here. This I'll say I had trouble with. How am I setting up? This says I have this many forces, and they're going to set up on map 2 in any of the town hexes. And I'm assuming this yellow stuff here, these are towns. And I already talked earlier about the counters and the scale. Those aren't towns. Those are just buildings that are not very close together. Unless I'm totally misunderstanding scale, someone might have to explain to me how this works. But anyway, if I come down, it tells me, oh, it's up here. It tells me that the victory is the Soviet player wins if he exits at least 2 infantry of his 5 off the south or east edge of the map. Okay, so let's move this off to the side. So here's my starting forces. I've put them in the recommended starting hexes. And this is map 2. It's upside down in order to make it to fit the scenario. And then it says they have to move south or move east. Okay. Well, I'm at the bottom of the map, and here is south. Now, herein lies the problem. An infantry unit can move at a speed of 2. On the counter, the number in the lower left is their movement factor. So, moving through a town costs 1, open field costs 1, and then if you start on roads, you get like some road bonuses. So really, 1, 2, when that unit activates, he's already 50% done with the scenario. Now, the German player, okay, I'm looking at that, I'm like thinking, okay, that'll be easy, because now if he tries to go east, because to me, south is down. But now if he goes east, he's not got that much farther to go either. 1, 2, 3. So like 2, and then 2, and then 2. Like, he's got a little ways to go. So I have 2 maps. I just got these forces sitting out here. I just set them out. But they gave me 2 maps to play on. And the thing is, I don't need that second map. Like, I don't know why this first scenario, the way it's set up here, has got 2 maps. Because once I go east, you know, I don't know why I would go west. East is right there. Now, when I set up my German units, okay, because it says south and east, I'm going to be trying to get him kind of surrounded. I'm going to put some units here, and I would want to put some units down here to block the south. Because he could travel, you know, this way. So I can put, you know, I'm going to have to put some units here to try and block him from going around to the south. I'm going to have to put some units here to keep him from going east. But now here's the kicker. Let's come back to this scenario. It says, let me come down to the Russian placement. There's their chit pool. Here's their efficiency, which is good. It says all units available for setup must be at least 8 hexes away from the nearest Soviet unit. Well, I can't put any in the south because 1, 2, 3, 4, I've hit my limit. Now if I go here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I can't put any here on the east, technically, because that's within 8. So all my units had to be set up over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's kind of why they're sitting over here, because I can't put them over here. Like, I'm going to have to put some up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8. Like, I could put some here and have them drive south. And then I'm going to have to put some units here and have them kind of come this way and cut across the bottom. You know, that could be exactly what they had in mind. And that I do need the second map for that, because I got to be able to put them on their 8 hexes out. So yeah, it's I'm having to really kind of think, oh my gosh, where do I put people? Now, here's the good news for this setup. You got to look at what the forces they've given you. The Russian player starts with a bunch of infantry. 3 infantry, 2 heavy weapon infantry, a gun, and a vehicle. Probably the vehicle to tow the gun, which is fine. And then reinforcements will come in on turn 2 on any hex on the south edge of the map. He's going to get tanks and some trucks, and then some more guns, a lot of stuff anywhere on this south edge. So right along here. So while my Germans are trying to sweep down through here, at some point his Russians are going to come up down here. They're going to come sweeping up. So right as I'm getting my units to come through here, he's going to come in, and then, you know, I don't know, it looks like a mess. It does. I'm not sure how to play that out. So I'm already stuck on the first scenario on how to set up my troops, and then the best way to go about playing it. Now, here's an advantage I have as the German player. I have a lot of tanks. So, like, here's a tank unit, and it says for the Germans, they can actually start the map with the infantry loaded on the armored fighting vehicle. So that's what I did here, as I was putting infantry on the tanks. Now, down here, I put a stack. Now, you can put a stacking limit of 6 into a hex. On the top of each counter, they have, can you even see that? I'm not sure if you can see that. I don't think this is going to display everything I want you to see. Let me bring this whole stack up here. Hold on. You might be able to see that. So when you put infantry on a vehicle, the vehicle has like 2 ticks and infantry has 2 ticks. So that means the vehicle can carry 2 ticks worth of stuff. So one vehicle platoon carries 1 infantry platoon. When the vehicle is carrying the infantry, then the infantry don't count towards stacking, just the vehicle, because they're technically on the vehicle. So what I put down here at the bottom is 3 tank platoons, so they can carry a bunch of infantry down here, because the infantry moves slow. They have a movement of 1, and the panzers have a movement of 7. So if I put them down here on this bottom hex that you can't see, and when they become active, because I'm going to put them as close to that 8, like right on the 8 limit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think you can't see it, but man, I'm going to just move these guys. Let's see, can you see it? Yeah, they're off. Let me move this stack over. Because essentially what I'm going to do is just race across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, 7, when they get their movement of 7, that's going to put them right about in here. And then if they've moved 1, 2, then I can start thinking about possibly assault fire, or overrun something, because, you know, if he moves 2, 1, 2, in another turn, he'll be right here on the map edge. I'm going to have to race down and do overruns. This is really hard. I'm just really trying to think about how do I maneuver those elements so I can drop off some defending units to keep them from getting off the board. And the same thing's up here. Like if I have a stack up near the top, because remember, I can't deploy within 8. That's not quite 8. Let me move it on here so you can see. The problem that I have is, man, I have to race down here. Now, luckily, going east, 1, 2, 1, 2, it's almost the same thing. One or two move. Well, no, it's more hexes. So, he's better off going south than east, but I still got to race to try and come down and block his movement east if he wanted to split it up. And then on turn 2, according to the scenario, he has a whole bunch of vehicles that are going to come up from the south. So even if I get down here and deploy all these stuff in a nice defensive position, he's going to have a whole bunch of stuff come up to engage my platoon elements while these guys try to slip away. So while all of this stuff is fighting all his stuff that comes up, they could just kind of go down here, go southeast. It's tough. And then they've given me gun units, so that's what's going to help fight the Soviet reinforcements, is these guns are being towed by wagons, which I thought was cool. Because I thought, wagon? How do you move a wagon? Well, I guess horses pull wagons. Well, they used horses in World War II. And I thought, what am I going to pull with the wagon? Oh, I guess it's going to be horse-drawn wagon pulling these guns, because the wagon has 2 stack carry capability, and the guns are 2 stack. So my wagons are going to pull the guns, but the wagons have a terrible movement rate. They move 3. I'm trying to pull the wagon up 3. So once they're kind of within that 8, it's like 1, 2, 3. Then I could possibly unlimber on the next turn so they can shoot, because then you're going to have all those Russian reinforcements. That's tough. And the thing is, you don't want to stack too much, because like with infantry, they're riding vehicles, so it doesn't count. But like if I just have infantry stacked in a hex, when they're attacked, it pretty much, they can tell you how many of the infantry they're attacking, 1 or 2 units or all. Fortunately, armored units, you have to tell them which armored unit you're attacking. So there's a little benefit there, but stacking is still not a good thing. It's just rough. This is a really rough scenario for me to wrap my head around as far as how to start and play. So, plus, here's the plus. Remember how I said I only read just the basics to get in here and play? Well, yeah, that's what I did here. I didn't read all of the infantry rules. Well, I didn't read all the engineer rules. I didn't read artillery rules. And that's actually a big part of this scenario number 1 even. Because during the first 4 turns of this 7-turn match, the Germans are being attacked by artillery. And there's even a special rule on the artillery attack. Plus, in the German, he gets an engineer unit. So this very first scenario, this is not a tutorial scenario, because it's including all the stuff I said don't read, because I'm just learning. So I'm probably going to have to modify it a little bit. I like the fact that I've got, the chance to practice pulling in reinforcements and doing some of that stuff. But like what I'm doing here, for me, when I do play through, is no artillery, which the thing is, they try to balance these scenarios, so artillery is part of that balancing. Like the Soviets probably don't have as many units because it's balanced out by incoming artillery against the Germans, kind of a thing. So if I take out artillery, I should either add some vehicles or take some away from the Germans. But I'm going to play it out as it is. Now, one thing I am taking away from the Germans, though, is the engineer. So I won't have mines or any obstacles or things like that the engineers could do. I'm just treating them as an infantry squad. So kind of balances out that way by taking out 2 sets of rules that each side was using. And then later on, when I feel more comfortable, I can start adding those elements in. So that's pretty much the setup of the game, what to expect to play. I just read the rules once, and I'm excited. I just have to figure out how to approach scenario 1, because that's a little much for me to wrap my limited, strategic, knowledgeable brain around. But, I'm willing to give it a try. So hopefully, not today, but in a day or so, I'll start to like maybe play through turn 1 and show you my setup and kind of play through turn 1 and explain how I understand the rules, especially with the changes I'm making by pulling out engineers and artillery, and that way we can focus together just kind of looking at movement and combat, which for me is the easiest to start with because that's mostly the focus, movement and combat. And then after that, play through a whole game. Maybe I'll come back and add in some other rules. So, check it out if you're interested. If you want to check it out for yourself, remember Consim World, look up Panzerblitz East Front, go to Board Game Geek. There's a convenient link there. I have a hard time navigating Consim World, but Board Game Geek, you go there, you type in Panzerblitz, look up Panzerblitz East Front. They have a link that goes right to Consim World, and then you're all set. Get all the files you want, participate in the discussion, and then, let me know what you think too. If this is the kind of stuff you're into, this is my cerebral part. The rest of me is all slashing and cutting them up in video games. This is the part where I get to think, and this one is definitely making me think. So thank you so much for watching. Share your thoughts and ideas. Let me know what games that you play, tactical games that you play, war games that you have in mind, and I'll check it out. I always like seeing new stuff, but I hope that you give this one a shot. All right, goodbye everybody.